Over 2,000 years ago, on a quiet hillside in Galilee, an event took place that would ripple through history, shaping not only religious thought but also the way we understand morality, justice, and what it means to live a good life. Jesus, a humble teacher from Nazareth, gathered a crowd of everyday people, farmers, fishermen, and seekers, eager to hear his message. This was not a speech for the elite, it was a message for everyone, especially those who felt lost, downtrodden, or in need of hope. The Sermon on the Mount, as it would come to be called, was not just a set of rules or an ancient lecture on ethical living. It was a revolutionary declaration, a manifesto of sorts, about the kingdom of God and how to live a life that reflects heaven's values here on earth. The teachings in this sermon are timeless, resonating just as powerfully today as they did when Jesus first spoke them. They challenge our notions of power, success, and happiness, turning the world's values upside down. At its core, the Sermon on the Mount invites us to a radical transformation, not just in how we act, but in how we think, feel, and treat others. It calls us to look beyond external appearances and achievements, pushing us to nurture our inner world. As we journey through the key teachings of this sermon, you'll discover how its wisdom is not just ancient philosophy but a practical guide for living in a modern world that often feels chaotic, disconnected, and in desperate need of deeper meaning. Jesus begins the Sermon on the Mount with a series of blessings known as the Beatitudes, Matthew 5 verses 3 to 12. At first glance, these blessings seem paradoxical. How can the poor in spirit or those who mourn be considered blessed? Yet, Jesus is calling us to see life differently, offering a new perspective on what it means to be truly happy and fulfilled. 1. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Being poor in spirit doesn't refer to material poverty but to humility, a recognition of our deep need for God. In a world that often celebrates self-sufficiency and pride, this teaching reminds us that true strength comes from acknowledging our spiritual neediness. Today, people who admit they don't have all the answers, who are willing to learn and grow, find themselves blessed with peace and wisdom beyond what the world can offer. 2. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Mourning is part of life, and Jesus doesn't shy away from this reality. But in a culture that often encourages us to avoid pain at all costs, he offers a promise of comfort. When we allow ourselves to feel deeply, whether it's grief over personal loss or compassion for a world full of suffering, we open ourselves to God's comfort. In today's fast-paced life, where emotions are often suppressed, those who mourn authentically are often the ones who find deep healing and connection with others. 3. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Meekness is often misunderstood as weakness, but in Jesus' teaching, it means strength under control. The meek are those who don't need to dominate others or demand their own way. They trust in God's timing and power. In today's world of social media dominance and loud voices, those who practice humility and gentleness stand out, often gaining true influence and respect. 4. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Jesus calls us to long for justice, not just in a legal sense, but in every part of life. Righteousness here means living in right relationship with God and others, striving for what is good and true. In a society where self-interest often takes center stage, those who passionately seek what's right for all are blessed with a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. 5. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Mercy involves compassion in action. It's more than feeling sorry for someone, it's choosing to forgive, to help, to show kindness even when it's undeserved. Mercy is countercultural in today's world of retaliation and grudges, yet it brings freedom and peace. Jesus teaches that when we show mercy, we ourselves experience God's mercy in return, transforming our relationships and our hearts. 6. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Purity of heart is about having undivided devotion to God. It's not just about outward behavior but about inward motives. In a world filled with distractions and competing desires, cultivating a pure heart allows us to see God's presence in our everyday lives and in the people around us. 7. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Peacemaking isn't passive, it's an active pursuit of harmony in relationships and in the world. In a society often marked by division and conflict, those who work for peace reflect the very nature of God. They bring healing where there's hurt, unity where there's division, and hope where there's despair. 8. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Following Jesus and standing for what's right can come at a cost. Whether it's facing criticism for standing up for justice or experiencing rejection for living out Christian values, those who endure persecution are promised a great reward. Their perseverance points to the eternal kingdom that is greater than any earthly struggle. Each of these blessings invites us to live counter to the culture around us, prioritizing humility, mercy, and peacemaking over power, pride, and selfishness. They call us to examine our hearts and challenge us to live in a way that reflects God's values, not the world's. After the Beatitudes, Jesus dives deeper into what it means to live out these values in practical ways, especially when it comes to relationships with others. His teachings on love, mercy, and forgiveness are some of the most challenging yet transformative aspects of the Sermon on the Mount. In a world where retaliation and grudges are often justified, Jesus calls his followers to a radical way of life. 1. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, Matthew 5 verse 44. This teaching is perhaps one of the hardest to live out. Loving those who hurt us goes against every natural instinct, but it is at the heart of Jesus' message. When we choose love over hate, forgiveness over resentment, we break the cycle of anger and revenge that poisons relationships and society. In today's polarized world, this command to love our enemies challenges us to rise above the noise and model a love that transforms. 2. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also, Matthew 5 verse 39. Turning the other cheek is not about being passive or allowing injustice to thrive, it's about choosing nonviolence and grace over retaliation. It's a call to respond to wrongdoing in a way that breaks the cycle of violence. Imagine if in today's conflicts, whether personal or political, we chose to respond with grace rather than aggression. How different would our world be? 3. Forgive, and you will be forgiven, Matthew 6 verse 14. Forgiveness is central to Jesus' teachings, and it's essential for personal peace and healthy relationships. Holding on to bitterness can consume us, but when we forgive, we release the hold that anger and resentment have on our hearts. Jesus reminds us that as we forgive others, we experience the forgiveness of God, freeing us from the weight of past wrongs. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus redefines what it means to be righteous. It's not about outward appearances or religious rule following, it's about a heart that is aligned with God's values. 1. Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 5 verse 20. The Pharisees were known for their strict adherence to religious rules, yet Jesus calls for a deeper righteousness, one that goes beyond external behavior and reaches into the motives of the heart. He emphasizes that true righteousness is about integrity, compassion, and living in alignment with God's heart, not just ticking off boxes on a moral checklist. 2. Do not be like the hypocrites, Matthew 6 verse 5. Jesus repeatedly warns against hypocrisy, calling his followers to live authentically. It's not about putting on a show of righteousness for others to see, but about living in a way that is genuine and consistent, both in public and private. In an age where image and reputation can often take precedence over substance, Jesus' teaching invites us to be real, before God, ourselves, and others. 3. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well, Matthew 6 verse 33. This is a call to prioritize God's values above all else. In a world that often prioritizes wealth, success, and personal gain, Jesus reminds us to seek the things that truly matter: justice, mercy, peace, and a relationship with God. When we do, we find that the other things we need, peace, joy, purpose, fall into place. Throughout the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus uses vivid imagery to help his listeners understand deep truths in a relatable way. One of the most well-known metaphors is when he calls his followers to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, Matthew 5 verses 13 to 16. You are the salt of the earth. Salt in the ancient world was not only used for flavoring but also for preserving food. When Jesus says we are the salt of the earth, he is calling us to bring flavor and preservation to the world around us. In a society that can feel bland and decaying, we are called to live in such a way that we bring out the best in others and preserve the goodness and truth of God's kingdom. You are the light of the world. Light illuminates and guides, revealing what's hidden in darkness. When Jesus calls us the light of the world, he's challenging us to live in such a way that others can see the truth and goodness of God through our actions. Whether it's acts of kindness, generosity, or leadership, we are called to shine brightly in a world that often feels dark and lost. The Sermon on the Mount is not just a set of teachings to be admired, it's a call to action. In today's world, where success is often measured by power, wealth, and external achievements, Jesus invites us to a different way of life, one that prioritizes humility, love, and inner transformation. In the workplace, being the light of the world might look like standing up for what's right, even when it's unpopular, or offering kindness and encouragement to a colleague who's struggling. In relationships, turning the other cheek might mean choosing to forgive rather than holding on to a grudge, even when you've been hurt deeply. In everyday life, seeking first God's kingdom could mean prioritizing time for reflection, prayer, and acts of service, rather than getting caught up in the endless pursuit of material success. These teachings challenge us to rethink what it means to live a meaningful life. They remind us that true happiness and fulfillment come not from self-promotion or wealth but from living in alignment with God's values, love, mercy, humility, and justice. Embrace the sermon's wisdom. The Sermon on the Mount is a roadmap to a life of purpose, peace, and transformation. It's a message that speaks to the heart of what it means to be human and to live in relationship with God and others. As you reflect on these teachings, I invite you to take them to heart. In a world that often feels upside down, the wisdom of Jesus offers a way to live that is right side up, a way that leads not only to personal fulfillment but also to the flourishing of those around us. As you go about your day, consider how you might live out these teachings in your own life. How can you be the salt of the earth and the light of the world in your community? Where can you bring mercy, peace, and forgiveness to a broken relationship? What steps can you take to seek first the kingdom of God?